continue to imbue him with romantic power, giving him such dangerous poetic labels as the one free man.
If you've ever bought a gun because of movies or a video game, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Guys, like and comment. Comment section is out of control. Dear God, I have tried to control you, but nothing works. Get in there. Find out why the comment section is the most savage part of the internet. Try to be nice to each other. It is a wild time. I want to see more niceness as all possible. Guys, the biggest supporter of the channel right now is Big Daddy Unlimited. Big Daddy Unlimited is like the Costco of the gun world, 99 cents for the first month. Is it worth it? Well, are you worth it? Of course, we have some great other sponsors for this particular video. We have LES Concealment, a big shout out to them and a big thank you to them. Of course, Vertex for bags, gear, and gloves, and Grizzly Targets, who's been supplying Range 69 with all of our great steel. So a big shout out to all those. Discount code for Grizzly is GT10. Definitely go check them out. 25% off at Vertex with Grand Thumb, if I'm not mistaken. Nice little plug right there. Ladies, gentlemen, and my often forgotten, but most certainly not by me, T72s, welcome to the channel. Today, we're gonna be talking about most literally my favorite firearm to have ever existed, the MP7. How fucking cool is this? So, I'm gonna be honest, the MP7 is a firearm that I have always just loved. Ever since I first got into guns, I said to myself, if I ever get the chance to shoot or own an MP7, I am good. I can die at this point. So I guess this is the end. Just kidding, we're good. But the point is, I just love the MP7. So I am probably gonna be very biased in this review. Oh well, I've done a review of this before on a different channel, but I have had a lot more time on the MP7 since then, so I'm very excited to talk about it today. But before we talk about this firearm, what is my relationship with the maker of this firearm, H&K? Well, first off, this weapon was provided to us for this review by Hurricane Butterfly. So a big thank you to him. Very cool, pretty much an international arms dealer. Go check him out. Great guy. Definitely support his business. But anyhow, H&K makes this weapon. What is my relationship with H&K? They have sent me two firearms to review at this point. So we have the SP5 and the SP5K. Review on the last one will be coming very soon. So understand that I have been provided firearms from them to do reviews on. Ammunition, in this case, was provided to us by Fiocchi. A big shout out to them for providing that ammunition. Thank you very much to them. And yeah, those are my relationships. Is it going to affect, how I view this weapon? Probably, because I already fucking love this gun. But let's talk about it a little bit, and I'll try to be as unbiased as possible and talk about some of the shortcomings of the H&K MP7. And let's get into it. Another shout out to James Williamson, just a wonderful H&K expert. Definitely go check him out. He has some great stuff out there on YouTube. All right, let's get into it. So if you're not familiar with the H&K MP7, I'm not Forgotten Weapons, but The MP7 is very interesting because it came from a NATO solicitation for a small personal defense weapon, a PDW, that would be able to defeat, at the time, Soviet body armor, just essentially Kevlar. So many weapons are developed, the biggest one, of course, being the P90, good old Stargate. So the P90 was developed before the MP7 with its 5.7 ammunition, and then the MP7 was later developed by H&K a little bit after the P90, and ultimately there was kind of a battle about which one to get adopted. They've both been adopted in various roles, but the MP7 ended up being very successful, not as it was really intended. It was originally intended as like a weapon to be used by rear echelon troops, something that they could have on them that could still defeat those pesky Soviets when they, parachuted in and stuff. It ended up, with the end of the Cold War, being used by a lot of specialized units, special operations units, specialized SWAT teams. It's been used everywhere from all over the world by different special ops teams to in the Osama bin Laden reign, just absolutely everywhere. So it has definitely ended up being a well-proven firearm, and it's a very interesting concept. So it fires a very, very interesting caliber. It fires a 4.6 by 30. This teeny little guy right there. I'll try to get that in the light right there. It's a tiny little round. We'll compare that to the 9mm right here, because it was meant to replace aging submachine guns, because as good as the MP5 is, the MP5 cannot defeat Kevlar very well. And as Kevlar became cheaper and everyone started wearing it, there was definitely a recognition that a different firearm was needed, which is why the 4.6 was developed and why the 5.7 was developed, because these can defeat soft body armor at all the way to about 200 meters. So very impressive weapons in their own kind of sphere of influence, but let's talk about it a little bit more. We're gonna do what my Marines love when they're underway with the Navy. We're gonna go tip to butt, just like we do on every firearm. We're gonna talk about what it's like to fire it, all the operating principles. Let's get into it. So to start off with, a little bit more on the 4.6. Very, very small little projectile. In many ways, it is definitely eclipsed by the 5.7 from the P90 and the FN57, which is in most ways a more capable round. Despite that, due to the compact size of this round, how light it is, the size of the MP7, and kind of the ease of use, the MP7 is kind of ending up being used by a lot more units, despite kind of the ballistic inefficiencies of this round compared to the other PDW round, the 5.7. In any case, these are usually around 30 grains on the projectile, and they're going around 2,400 feet per second, depending on the type of round that you're firing. So a lot of zip to these little rounds, but definitely a little bit ballistically anemic compared to many short-barreled rifles, such as 5.56 or 300 Black, or anything like that. But very interesting. So to start off with, the muzzle device. So the muzzle device on the MP7 is a very simple birdcage flash hider. It works very well at containing flash as much as is possible, but even more interesting is that there are a variety of suppressors developed for the MP7. The MP7 was designed to be used with a suppressor. So one of the suppressors that can be used is from B&T, which is specifically made to work with these mounts. Now, what's very interesting about the B&T suppressor, and good God, I wish I had one, and in the future I'm going to try to get my hands on one so I can demonstrate it, is it can rotate, because what happens is when you mount a suppressor, your point of impact is going to change. The suppressor from B&T allows you to rotate it to get that impact as minimal as possible with the MP7. So it is a very interesting design. Of course, 5.56 suppressors will work, as those are larger than the 4.6 rounds that are coming out of the muzzle, but I find the B&T suppressor extremely intriguing. So we have the muzzle right there. Nothing much more to say about it. Let's get to the barrel. H&K barrels, like anything else designed by H&K, is both over-engineered and extremely well-built. The barrels on the MP7 are exceptional, extremely accurate. I can easily make shots up to 200. The 4.6 is a fairly flat shooting round in that range, basically within its effective envelope ballistically. So I can easily make those shots. I did a lot of shots at 120 with the MP7, and it was absolutely no problem whatsoever. Again, you can easily make shots out to 200 with this, absolutely no problem. So a very exceptionally well-designed barrel. Also, in the event of a catastrophic failure, is specifically designed so that you do not die, which is very good. Again, HK does a lot of engineering into their weapons to ensure that they're very safe firearms, and that absolutely comes into play with the MP7. Just an exceptional piece of engineering. Moving from the barrel, we do have the handguard. So a lot to be said about the front right here. The end cap can be popped off so you can get over to the piston to do that kind of armor level maintenance on the MP7. Beyond that, a couple of things to look at right here. So on the sides right here, we have these screws. That's for mounting Picatinny rails. So you can see them on both sides right there. That's for mounting lights or any type of accoutrements or other things that you might need. Now, if you want to mount a laser, you're going to want to mount it on the top more than likely because this is a very stable mounting platform. Now, understand that on the MP7A2, this is an A1, the A2 does have a bottom rail right here as opposed to this folding grip. Now, the grip is very interesting. So to deploy the grip, you simply pull down on it and it locks into place. To release it, you pull down on this tab right here and then it rotates back into place. The weapon can of course be fired either way. You can fire it with the grip closed or you can fire it with it open. I tend to fire it with the grip open because it allows for a very easy, very modern grip. This is typically how I hold it. If you got really large mitts, some guys wrap their hands over, or if you have extremely large hands, some people wrap their hands all the way around the weapon with the grip closed. Again, it's going to come down to personal preference, but for me, I prefer that nice kind of very natural feel with the MP7. And again, it's a very natural feel. You also have a little lip right there to ensure that your hand doesn't slip out past in front of the muzzle. So again, a very well thought out design right there. Beyond that, we have a lot of openings in the handguard on either side to ensure that this thing can cool off as you are firing it full auto. And it does a fairly good job of staying cool. Understand that I was hella dumping rounds through this particular weapon and it did get hot, but it stayed very cool compared to a lot of weapons that I fired full auto. So again, it is very well engineered to ensure that it cools off and does not burn the shit out of you. Another note right here is you can see that we have sling mounts right here. So they are steel on the inside with polymer on the outside. So they are reinforced. You're not going to rip them right out. They are designed for HK hooks. What a lot of guys end up doing for sling mounts, because you can see you can also have them on the rear right here, is a lot of guys either use the HK hooks, they use an adapter that goes off the takedown pin at the back. A lot of guys also use 550 through these sling loops to ensure that they're not wearing on the polymer or anything like that. Tons of different options, but again, sling mounting is no problem with the MP7. Right below the sling mounts, we have this recessed area, and that is for the stock with the rails, because they slide right in there to ensure that it is nice and compact. This is very reminiscent of the H&K MP5 with its collapsible stock, which has a very, very similar feature. So you can see some influences in the way that that was designed. Moving up from there, we do have our top rail right here. So the top rail is very sturdy as far as mounting both optics or lasers. So if you're looking to mount either, I would definitely recommend the top rail. Now, the iron sights on the MP7 are very, very interesting in my opinion, for a couple reasons. When they're folded down, you can use them, or when they're deployed, you can use them. So when they're folded down, they have very pistol type sights, and I can actually see through the pistol sights through this particular mount, which is an SLR mount. So this allows you to get very low into the weapon for a low vis type roll if you had this in a jacket or something like that. So say you have it collapse in your jacket, you don't have to have those sights deployed. You can immediately pull that weapon out, bring it up, and fire with those sights down. Once you're in a better position, you can pop those sights up and then employ it. So it is a very well thought out design. And again, those pistol sights are very usable with the MP7 due to the very low recoil of this particular weapon. Now, there isn't a whole lot of rail space. So if you're going to use a laser on here, you definitely probably want to remove your sights right there. And you also have to think about optic height, because as you can see right here, the cheek weld that you have is actually much lower than what you typically have on an AR. So if you have an absolute height AR optic on your MP7, with the height of the stock, you're actually going to have a very high mount. A lot of people tend to use a very low mount on the MP7, but I enjoy having a very upright posture with the optic position on this particular weapon. In any case, with a PEC on there, it mounts up all very well. And again, there are multiple ways to run an MP7. A lot of people end up putting a light on the right side, and then on the rail on the left side, they put the pressure switch right there so that they can reach back with their thumb and actuate it, or they tape it down to the grip right there. Lots of different options out there. Lots of different ways to set up the H&K MP7. So moving from the top rail, we have our ejection port right here with our brass deflector, which is polymer reinforced steel, and our operating mechanism. The operating mechanism on the HK MP7 is a short stroke gas piston system. This is in stark contrast, which is essentially a scaled down G36 HK416 type system. Of course, the Germans, H&K, are very familiar with those systems as they developed and perfected both of them. This is in stark contrast to the FN-P90, the direct competitor to the MP7, where the P90 is a direct blowback weapon. Because of the short stroke gas piston system, which is incredibly reliable, this weapon has very, very little recoil. It's kind of hard to describe. When you fire the H&K MP7, I would put it at maybe about a third of the recoil you get from a 5.56 AR, but with about the same snap. It's kind of hard to describe, but when you fire it, it is definitely a snappy gun, but it drives right back on the target as you fire. It's a very, very easy gun to control on full auto. In fact, you can fire it like a pistol, no problem, with very little recoil. It is a exceptionally well-balanced, well-gassed system. And this is owing in large part to that short stroke gas piston system. Because of that, the bolt doesn't have to be heavy in order to resist everything going on. Because of that, you have a very lightweight system with very little recoil, a very, very good design choice on the part of H&K. They just did an excellent job with this. And the H&K MP7, with everything kind of combined right there, the first time you hold it and shoot it, you're like, that's it. You know, a lot of times guns that I hold in really high esteem ended up not being that great, but the MP7 is one that has more than lived up to all the expectations that I had for it. Moving down from there, let's talk about the controls. So we have a bolt release on both sides. The Germans are all about that ambidextrous life. So if you want to release the bolt, it's very simple. You simply press down the lever here, or the lever on the other side, and you can do it either way. So right there, or the other side. Now, the magazine release is very HK-like as well. It is a paddle magazine release. You press down on it instead of pressing in. So that's on either side, just like your typical HK USPs and many other firearms out there. I don't like the magazine release that much. To be honest, I prefer a more AR mag release. I find them to be more intuitive because when you're firing it, typically you have your hand choked up on it. So if you try to press it down with your hand choked up, kind of gets in the way. So you kind of have to break your grip in order to drop that magazine, the next one in, and drop that bolt. But what's cool is that you can operate everything from the reload with your trigger finger. So in a reload, you're not going to have your trigger finger on the trigger, so it actually does make sense. So in practice, doing those reloads are actually fairly fast. You just kind of have to work at it. And there are a couple different ways you can run an HK MP7 reload. The first method is you drop the magazine with your trigger finger, you insert the magazine. As soon as the magazine's inserted, you can drop that bolt. Conversely, you can run it like a AR reload where you drop that magazine right there. That magazine drops out. As soon as it gets back in, you then rotate up with your hand and get it just like an AR bolt. So there are a couple different ways to do it. You're going to end up doing whatever feels best for you. But honestly, I think that running everything with your trigger finger makes a lot more sense. And indeed, many experienced people who run the MP7 tend to use it that particular way. Now, the safety on the HK MP7 is one of those interesting things. I think that the HK safeties are always a little bit awkward, except for the 416 because it's very AR-like. And that's definitely true of the MP7. So when you have the stock extended, your thumb is kind of just barely on there. Now, it does work. Again, I kind of have medium-sized man hands, so those big hands out there are probably not going to have any trouble. And again, it kind of depends on your positioning of your thumb, and you can get it, but it's just me being nitpicky. What I tend to do is engage the safety with my thumb, and then on the opposite side, because it is ambi, I tend to engage the safety by pressing my hand up into it. Now, a lot of people do run the MP7 like an MP5, and that's kind of an old thing where you run your thumb same side in order to actuate the safety and that type of thing. That does work. Again, it's going to come down to personal preference. Now, a quick note with the safety, it is very, very easy to drive that thing into full auto. So when you're bringing this weapon up, there have been multiple times where I just did it right there, where I drive it straight into full auto because it's very easy. This is in stark contrast to, say, a M4 platform where you have to rotate it all the way to 180 degrees. So your move to full auto has to be very deliberate. The MP7, on the other hand, wants to pepper everything with angry little bees. So that full auto mode is always just right at your fingertip. So when you do want to go into full auto, it is very easy with the H&K MP7. So on the subject of angry bees, I want to take a quick moment to talk about some of the experiences of some of my friends who have used this overseas. Now, they are quick to note to me that they do not like the MP7 due to the somewhat anemic nature of the 4.6. They point out that it excels as a PDW. However, you have to be aware that the weapon is still a PDW and does require a little bit more on your part to ensure that you put somebody into the ground. That's due to the fact that the rounds are so small. Now, everything matters with shot placement, of course. You have to make sure that you're getting good hits into areas that will incapacitate a human, i.e. central nervous system or some major artery or bloodway or something along those lines to incapacitate them. It's not that the 4.6 isn't able to do that, it's just that it doesn't have as large of a round to be able to nick as much as it's traveling through, so your aim has to be a little bit more true. So what they've noted is they've typically used anything from a third to a half a mag to put something to the ground. They note that this is perhaps also due to the extremely high cyclic rate of the MP7, which is around northward of 900 rounds per minute. It is a very fast firearm. In any case, I want to relay a little bit about their experiences, but they do note that it is effective. You just have to understand the limitations of the gun compared to other platforms out there. All right, moving down to the grip. The grip is very reminiscent of the HK P2000. It looks and feels just like it. The grip angle is absolutely wonderful on the HK MP7. I love everything about it. It feels very good in the hand to hold the MP7. It's a very compact weapon. It points very easily. I love everything about it and the way it feels. So no complaints from me on the grip. Now, the magazine well is leaves a little bit something to be desired. You have to kind of get it right in there. You gotta really line that up to get it right in the hole. As far as the magazines are concerned, there are a couple different magazine options out there, and we'll talk about them right now. We'll talk a little bit about the magazines because they are very, very interesting as well. Again, H&K over engineering. So we have 20, 30, and then 40 rounders. Unfortunately, I don't have my 40 rounders here right now, but they are just a little bit more extended. But the magazines are very interesting. So first off, why would you want a 20 round magazine? Well, again, the H&K MP7 was designed to be used in a variety of roles. One of those roles is as a concealed carry, essentially PDW. So the 20 rounder does fit absolutely flush with the weapon. So if you didn't have this optic on here and you just had the low pistol iron sights, you have a very concealable weapon that you can have under your coat on a sling. Simply pull that out, empty through that 20 round magazine, and then rock in a 30 or 40, whatever else you have on you. So it is a very concealable design when it has that 20 on. Again, compare that to an H&K MP5 that is all the way collapsed, and you can see the relative size difference. It is a very, very compact weapon. Now, more on the magazines, because again, they are very, very interesting. First off, the magazines of any firearm can make or break a design, because if it's a poorly designed magazine, then you're gonna have a weapon that just doesn't function. Lucky for us, H&K designs very good weapons and very good magazines, and that is absolutely the case with the MP7 magazine. They are made of steel with very strong feed lips, a very good design, and they are very, very reliable. If you notice, they have that slight curve, and that is due to the form factor of the 4.6 in order to make sure that they feed perfectly. Now, on all of your magazines, you have a Made in Germany on the left-hand side, Made in Germany with the caliber on the left-hand side, 4.6 by 30. And again, if you're turbo retarded or in the army, whatever, on the right-hand side, it has a picture of a bullet with the number 30 on it. The question is, what does that mean? If you notice, look at this one as well, has a picture of a bullet on it and the number 20. So again, 20 rounds, 30 rounds. Again, this was for my Army guys out there. But what's very interesting is that round on the right side, what that means is that when this is loaded fully, and again, you can check right here, there's a polymer window right there to check to ensure that it's fully loaded, the round should be on the right-hand side, which is why it has the bullet right there. Why this matters is because if you're doing a press check on a weapon, and if you're gonna argue about press checks right now, it's important to make sure that your weapon is properly loaded. A press check is a very normal thing to do. Because of the size of the chamber and everything, it's very hard to do an effective press check with an MP7. But because with the magazine, we know that when it's fully loaded, that round should be on the right-hand side. If I properly load the MP7, put a round in the chamber, if I re-eject that magazine, because I've just stripped one round, that round should now be on the left-hand side. I can easily feel that with my glove on, be like, okay, it is loaded, good to go, and I'm ready for my mission and all that type of stuff. So again, just another simple thing that H&K has done to ensure that everything's gonna flow perfectly for you with this particular weapon system. Okay, so I have avoided it for as long as possible. For the first time ever on Grand Thumb, we are going to ghost an H&K MP7 together. I am so excited about this. So we're gonna do it both semi and full, so let's go ahead and start it off. So we're gonna put a little Unchained melody on very softly so I don't violate any copyrights, and we're gonna feel this right here. So first off, there is a Glock style safety on it. That means that if I don't press that center, this weapon will not fire. I have to depress that center that allows the trigger to press to the rear, just like a Glock safety. There are multiple safeties in the HK MP7. We'll talk about them in a little bit. All right, so feeling into it, disengage that safety. We have about 2 millimeters of play, and we have our break. That is really nice, okay. That broke at under 5 pounds, between 3 and 4. Okay, let's check the reset right here. Okay, I'm bringing it forward. We have about 2, 3, 4 millimeters, and then we're right back at that wall, and a clean 2 millimeter break at about 3 to 4 pounds. A very, very nice semi-automatic trigger. Feel that one more time. Incredible. Most machine guns do not have great triggers. Most military weapons do not have nice triggers, but the HK MP7 has a phenomenal trigger in semi-auto. It is very easy to run it fast and effectively. I cannot comment on how nice the trigger feels. It actually feels better than an AR trigger in many ways. That is cool. Many HK guns have kind of shitty triggers like the MP5 and the G36, so I can really appreciate all the engineering that went into making this a good trigger. Good on you, HK. Just incredible. So that being said, let's go ahead and put that into full auto and see how that trigger feels. All right, same take up, same, actually less of a wall with the full auto. A very light trigger break, perhaps 3, maybe a little bit under. All right, let's feel the reset. And there, of course, there is no reset because it's full fucking auto. That is cool. Good times. Full auto guns, always fun. So the trigger is incredible. The trigger is just really well designed on the HK MP7. Again, I know I'm just simping hard for the MP7. It's supposed to be no simp September, but I can't help myself. I really love this gun. Moving back from the trigger, we have our charging handle right here. This charging handle is very reminiscent of a AR type charging handle. Squeeze both sides, pull it back, and you can actuate the weapon. All right, very interesting. Some people have noted that in slow motion, when you're firing this will bounce back a little bit. A little quirk of the gun hasn't bothered me at all. Again, it's pretty soft, but sometimes it does bounce a little bit. NBD. From there, we go into the stock. There's so much to say about the MP7. It's such an interesting design. So to start off with, we have these 2 holes right there. The 2 holes are for the 2 takedown pins right here. That way, if you're doing field maintenance on this weapon, you can store them in the stock to ensure that you don't lose them. Just another thing to ensure that they are looking after the guys on the ground. The stock is very comfy. It is a wire type stock, but it actually feels really good due to the way that they contoured the wire stock, so it feels perfectly comfortable to put your cheek up against it. And again, what's really interesting is the release mechanism. So the release mechanism is right here. So when it's all the way in, you can't pull it out. You have to release it, and then you can pull it out. So what a lot of people who use the MP7 do is that they tend to put something right here to ensure that it can't lock up all the way. That way, when they need to deploy the MP7, they can simply pull that stock out and bring it up and fire. Now, for me, of course, I leave that mechanism untouched for the purposes of this review, but it is a couple of interesting notes. Now, there are different stocks out there because this is a one-position stock for the MP7. However, there are 3-position stocks that allow the stock to be at different lengths. That way, if you're wearing body armor, if you're shorter, if you're turbo small like a manlet, you can make this sure that this weapon will fit up into you very, very well. So again, there are different options out there, but my point being is that the stock feels absolutely incredible. This weapon is just an incredible weapon. Tons of really interesting safety features in the bolt. There are tungsten granules that ensure that it's kind of a deadfall. That way there's little to no bolt bounce. There are multiple safeties in the firing pin to ensure that there's no slam fires. There's a firing pin spring. There's a firing pin block to make sure that when the weapon is dropped, it won't go off. This is a very safe, very over-engineered weapon that when fired on full auto, it's so hard to describe because it's snappy, but the weapon just stays on target. You can unleash an angry swarm of 4.6 millimeter bees just onto target, absolutely no problem. The weapon on full auto is an absolute dream. The trigger is very easy and the recoil impulse is just perfect. I love everything about this gun. They are absolutely incredible. If there's any weapon that I would say is worth it to get your hands on if you have an SOT, or if you're at some point in the future, somehow H&K comes out with a civilian version, for the love of God, please do it. This is the weapon to get. Very, very cool. Very interesting piece of technology, but you have to understand the role that it plays because it is a PDW, a personal defense weapon. Don't confuse this with having the same prowess as a weapon with a larger caliber like a 5.56 or something along those lines. Everything has its place, as does the MP7, but the MP7 remains one of my favorite weapons ever, and I am so happy to be doing the review on it. But here's the thing, as cool as this weapon is, it's not going to matter unless you get training. So get out there and get training. Tons of great guys to get training from. We have Bear Solutions, Cogworks, Haley Strategic, Pat McNamara, Tony Cowden, tons of great guys out there. Check them out, get that training, get better, because your mind is the weapon. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with me and bringing me to a point where I'm able to, review a weapon like this and have these opportunities. Can't thank you guys enough. I've got nothing else for you. Take care. All right, final note for you guys. Everybody is freaking out right now, so I'm going to tell you guys what I used to tell people when I used to be a survival instructor back in the day, and that is change what you can and don't worry about what you can't. What I mean by that, in the broadest of terms, is say you are in a survival situation, you are crashed on the side of a lake, your boat broke down or your plane crashed and you're on the side of a lake and you see a huge snowstorm coming and all you have are the clothes on you. And you're like, I'm gonna fucking freeze to death right now. But what can you do? Can you worry about the storm and cry about it? Sure, but what you could do is you could be proactive, build yourself a shelter, get a fire going to ensure that you can survive that storm. That's what you can change. You cannot change the storm. So think about that in terms of your life and make those according changes, and it might just help you have a little bit less stress. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for staying with us to this point. Big shout out to, of course, Survival Dispatch. Survival Dispatch is a site that's a repository of survival information. Go check them out. Lots of great information there. Final shout out to my Patreon people. You have made this channel incredible. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, love you guys. Stay safe out there. I've got nothing else for you.